56% of people globally feel their society is literally broken. 47% people feel so desperate they want a leader who will break the rules to fix things. 68% people believe the economy is rigged to favor the rich and powerful, and it's a sentiment that hasn't improved in a decade. These stats are from the Ipsos Populism Report. It's a massive 31-country study that analyzes how a global collapse of trust are reshaping our world. But the main question is why? Why is there such pervasive pessimism and this erosion of trust in the system? Has it always been this way, or has it become more systemic now? But we were conditioned to believe that all we had to do was work hard and everything would just automatically align. We were told that equal opportunity is a universal reality and we simply have to be meritocratic enough to seize it. But does equal opportunity truly exist, or is it a construct, a myth that the system has manufactured and reinforced over decades so that we have no choice but to perceive it as being completely true, this rigid structure as being inherently equitable? In this video, we shall talk about the origin of meritocracy, how it has affected our lives, society, and politics, and how the way it's presented is fundamentally flawed because it isolates talent and hard work as the only variables of success, but conveniently removes factors like resources, geography, luck, and power structures from the equation, when in reality, these factors don't just influence the final outcome, they also actively shape the very talent and hard work we were able to bring to the table. But honestly, even if the system was perfectly fair, should winning really be the only way to deserve a good life? Is it actually right to justify huge inequality just because someone is better? To understand this, we have to first look at the history of this idea of meritocracy. We actually think of this meritocratic system as the only fair way to live because we have grown up in its success. After the Cold War, a famous idea called the end of history suggested that Western liberal democracy had essentially won the global battle of ideas. Almost every country began moving towards this model, and with it came a specific definition of equality, that as long as everyone has the same opportunity to compete, the resulting inequality is justified. But before this era, there were many rival ideologies with very different definitions of what a fair society looked like. The meritocracy we see today is actually the classical liberal definition of equality. It argued that if you are at the top, it's a result of your own individual talent, and if you are at the bottom, it's a result of your own laziness or lack of effort. This mindset actually has a much older history in interpretations of Christian thought. It's a secular version of the shift from believing success as an unearned blessing to believing that it's a proof that you are a good and virtuous person. Political theorists eventually removed the religion, but we kept the judgment, eventually viewing those who struggle as being morally at fault for their own situation.
1929, all America's illusions exploded in her face.
During the middle of 20th century, there was actually a trend away from this classical logic even in liberal democracies around the world, especially after the Great Depression and new interventionist and regulative economic policies. Many governments moved towards the welfare state and social democracy to basically intervene in the market to stimulate the economy and help people.
Government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem.
However, in 1980s, leaders like Reagan and Thatcher ushered in a new era of neoliberalism and market-driven economics. This was basically a return to the classical idea that market is the only fair judge of person's value. This wasn't just a Western trend, it was accelerated through globalization and assimilated into systems around the world. Governments stopped focusing on the collective good and started focusing on efficiency of production to compete in the global market. This global shift created a massive amount of despair that boiled over during the 2008 financial crisis. People saw that the winners who caused the crash were protected, while ordinary people who worked hard lost everything. Globalization made this worse as people felt their lives were being decided by forces beyond their control. But since 2008, the economic gap has widened as middle-class wealth stagnated while top-tier assets were protected by systemic bailout. The COVID-19 pandemic accelerated this divide. Between 2020 and 2022, the world's 10 richest men doubled their wealth, while the income of 99% of humanity fell. By 2026, persistent inflation has further eroded buying power. It means that the middle-class household now spend a significantly larger portion of their income on basic necessities like housing and food compared to 20 years ago. The results of this report are honestly very concerning, and they highlight the extent to which the system is broken. And this whole frustration is exactly why we see a rise in right-wing populism across the globe and a desire for strongman leaders who promise to break the established rules in countries as different as Hungary, India, Brazil, Argentina, Italy, and the US, and many other countries. Whether you agree with them or not, their rise is a huge sign that people across the globe feel like the current system is failing them. These movements actually tap into that sense of being invisible or the feeling that the system is broken and something is off. Populist narrative offers simplistic explanations for otherwise complex and more nuanced problems. While simple explanations are attractive and comfortable but also dangerous, their narrative often creates a boogeyman to blame for our problems, like immigrants or global elites. These populist governments are ultimately harmful because they don't actually fix the unfair economic system.
Poisoning the blood of our country. That's what they've done. They poison mental.
They just replace meritocratic smugness with tribal anger. They attack the institutions of democracy and minority rights and try to deflect us from the real issues by offering people a fake sense of pride
ये
based on who
संपत्ति
they
इकट्ठी
exclude.
करके किसको बांटेंगे? जिनके ज्यादा बच्चे हैं उनको बांटेंगे। घुसपैठियों को बांटेंगे।
Once I started reading about this, I realized that equality isn't just one simple thing. There are actually a few ways to look at it, and they all have their ups and downs. First, there's equality of opportunity. It is something that we have been talking about. Though everyone gets the same starting line and hard work and talent is rewarded, it ignores that some started with better shoes. Then there's equality of outcome, where everyone ends up with the same slice of pie. It's the most fair on paper, but it's really hard to do in real life without the government controlling everything, which can lead to lack of innovation in the system. And then there's equality of condition. This one doesn't care if we have the same amount of money as long as we all have the same access to things that make life dignified, like healthcare, parks, and schools. It builds a real sense of community, but it requires a lot of trust and access to work. And the scary part isn't that we picked one, it's that we have followed the meritocracy narrative so blindly that we think it's the only version of fairness. When we do that, our version of the world gets skewed. We stop seeing the struggle around us as a system problem and start seeing it as a personal failure. And it can leave us clueless about how to change the system for better. The reason it's so hard to see past this view is that without an outside perspective, meritocracy is hard to see because it is self-validating. If you succeed, the system calls you a genius. If you fail, it tells you that you are the problem. It erases factors like luck, history, geography, and structural unfairness from the conversation. This is where Michael Sandel's book, The Tyranny of Merit, comes in. He explains why this fair system has actually become a toxic trap. He points out that we have become obsessed with the rhetoric of rising, the idea that you can make it if you try. But this has two major flaws. We talk about climbing the ladder, but the rungs are getting further and further apart. In reality, social mobility is lower than we think. We have turned education into a sorting machine where a university degree is the only gatekeeper to social respect. This creates a credentialist prejudice where we look down on anyone without a specific degree. In this way, we basically devalue the dignity of their work. I think that a lot of us feel like the world is becoming a sad place. Maybe it's always been like this, or maybe it's getting worse. But as we grow up, the fairness we were told about starts to feel like a lie. When you see systems failing people every day, it's easy for things to look dim and bleak. The natural reaction is to withdraw, but Sandel says that we actually need a new consciousness. Instead of withdrawing, we need to recognize the system failure for what it is. He argues that we have been trapped in a sorting machine where we only value people based upon their degrees or their market price. But because we do this consciously or unconsciously, we create a system like that, or we don't hold the system accountable for such things, or we don't push for policies to change that. Being conscious about something being off is very important in this sense. Practically achieving this new consciousness means shifting our focus from how do I win to how do we make life tolerable for everyone. He argues that what we really need is to push for a system that recognizes this and works to make the world more tolerable for everyone. He also emphasizes the importance of collective goods and services, and he also gives a bunch of other suggestions. The social world is complicated and messy and kind of unpredictable. Unlike the laws of physics, there isn't just one correct way to see society. So my explanations, they are just one way. Someone else might read the same book, see the world, and they would see something totally different. And I think that's the most beautiful part. And what do you think about the time we are living in? Does it feel as bleak to you, or do you see a different way through it? I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments. We tend to grow up believing that the social reality we are given is the only true version of the world. But as we have seen today, the reality is often a bubble. And it's a bubble that is built on a rigged economic game that leaves most of us behind. If you want to look into how these bubbles of information actually shape our perspectives and even lead to deep divisions we see in society, you should watch my video on why humans hate.